The Dollmaker Crew. The street had never been quiet like this before. Windows reflected only darkness, yet shapes moved inside them that didn't belong. Every porch light flickered, as if signaling something unseen. Jenna woke at 2:57 a.m. A soft thud came from the hallway. Not furniture, not pets. Something lighter, deliberate. She froze, heart hammering, staring into the shadows. The Dollmaker Crew had arrived. 5 figures, tall and thin, draped in black and porcelain masks, gloved hands tucked at their sides. Each step they took made no sound, yet the floorboards seemed to remember every movement. Jenna's dresser drawer shifted slightly. A small, twisted doll now sat on top, its features a grotesque, almost perfect reflection of her own. She reached for it, but a shadow slid over her hand, and the doll remained just out of reach. If you're watching, make sure you're subscribed. They noticed the eyes that linger too long. The neighbors began seeing them too. Dolls appeared in windows, cribs, and on porches, each one different, each one twisted in impossible ways. Some had extra limbs. Some had faces sewn sideways. All were watching. One man tried to leave. When he stepped outside, he noticed the dolls on every doorstep along the street, their eyes following him. Panic struck. He ran, but the dolls seemed to shift closer when his back was turned. Don't look away. Stay with Halfway Dark. You need to see how this unfolds. Inside Jenna's apartment, the crew moved methodically. A doll appeared in the kitchen, another on the sofa. Each seemed to mark territory, leaving subtle signs of their presence. A string looped through a handle, a pin beneath a cushion. She noticed the faint sound of scissors snipping, thread running over fabric, and soft breathing that wasn't hers. The dolls weren't just toys, they were a message. A neighbor captured them briefly on camera. 5 shadowed figures, masks glinting under dim light, hands moving delicately over each doll before vanishing. Playback distorted the image. Only static remained, with whispers echoing faintly. Follow, watch, learn. Remember to subscribe. If you want to see what they do next, you have to stay close. The crew worked silently. They moved objects around, arranged dolls in impossible positions, and left small, symbolic items beside them. A broken comb, a single button, a strand of hair. Every action felt purposeful, but the meaning remained hidden. By morning, Jenna was exhausted, her mind unable to stop seeing the dolls in every corner. She tried to leave the room. One doll had shifted slightly, its head now tilted toward her, eyes unnaturally bright. The dolls multiplied overnight. Each one appeared just where she would see them first. Their presence was suffocating yet precise. They were teaching her to notice, to anticipate, to watch. Keep watching, stay subscribed. They learned from those who turn away too soon. Neighbors noticed similar patterns. Objects subtly shifted, doors left ajar, faint scratches on walls. No one ever saw the crew enter or leave. Their presence was felt, observed, and remembered. One brave soul tried to destroy a doll. The moment scissors touched it, the figure's shadow passed across his bedroom, freezing him in place. When he looked up, the doll was untouched, perfectly aligned on the nightstand. If you want to survive the next night, stay tuned and subscribe. The horror box watches, and so do they. By the 3rd night, Jenna realized the crew wasn't just placing dolls. They were creating a mirror of her life, each doll representing an action, a fear, a secret. Every movement she made seemed copied and critiqued. The dolls became her world. She slept among them, ate with them, even breathed carefully, aware of their silent evaluation. The crew never spoke, never interacted beyond placement, yet their influence was absolute. Stay close to Halfway Dark. Every second of attention matters when they're near. Weeks passed. Dolls appeared not only in homes, but along streets, in cars, in alleyways. People began noticing that watching them too long caused unease, headaches, almost as if the dolls fed on attention. The final night, Jenna tried to confront them. She reached out, speaking softly. "Why us?" The dolls remained still, but the masks on the figures reflected a faint glimmer, a frozen smile that twisted unnaturally. Suddenly, all dolls in the room tilted toward her, moving as if by invisible strings. The crew hovered silently, shadows stretching along walls. Jenna froze. The realization struck her. The dolls were never the real threat. The crew was the mind behind them, always watching, always learning, always patient. Don't look away. Keep your eyes on Halfway Dark, subscribe, and survive another night. By dawn, the dolls were gone. The crew vanished. Only faint black dust remained along the floors, strings trailing toward doors, and an overwhelming sense that they would return. Always return. Every movement, every sound in the quiet streets reminded residents that the Dollmaker Crew never leaves undone work. And those who dared ignore the signs or stop watching rarely remembered the warning in time. The Candlestick Thieves. The cul-de-sac had never looked so still. Streetlights flickered, casting long shadows across parked cars and trimmed hedges. Something moved behind the glass of the closest house, barely visible, yet impossible to ignore. Tom had been woken by the faint clatter of metal. He sat up, listening. A candle flickered on the dining table, though he had never lit it. The flame danced unnaturally, twisting shadows across the walls. Outside, 5 figures appeared. They moved in perfect synchronicity, carrying tall candlesticks that glowed faint red. Their clothes were antique, Victorian in style, yet each mask obscured any hint of human features. The figures entered silently. Their candlesticks seemed to illuminate only what they wished to see. Chairs shifted subtly, rugs moved, and the air grew colder, carrying a faint scent of wax and smoke. Tom's phone buzzed. A notification from a neighbor. "Do you see them too?" He glanced outside. Every window reflected moving shadows, each one perfectly aligned with the thieves' motions. The Candlestick Thieves circled the room, stopping occasionally to adjust objects. A picture frame was tilted. A small vase rolled to the edge of the table. Nothing appeared stolen, yet the house felt violated. A candle on the hallway table flickered violently. The shadows elongated, stretching toward the ceiling before retreating. Tom could feel the weight of unseen eyes, tracing his every movement. He moved toward the stairs. A candlestick was left upright in the middle of the hall, wax dripping in strange patterns. The shadows around it seemed to twist independently of the light, forming jagged silhouettes that resembled people frozen mid-motion. "Keep watching and stay close to Halfway Dark." The whisper seemed to echo from nowhere, yet Tom understood. Someone had to witness this. The thieves continued their work. They rearranged books, polished surfaces with cloths that didn't exist, and brushed the walls lightly, leaving traces of black wax that hardened in intricate patterns. At one point, a candlestick was placed on the windowsill. The shadow it cast moved across the room like a living thing, mimicking Tom's movements perfectly. He stepped backward, and the shadow receded, only to expand again when he froze. Outside, the neighbors reported similar disturbances. Shadows moved in windows, candles appeared mysteriously, and a faint sound of scraping metal echoed down the streets. Each house bore subtle signs of intrusion. Nothing stolen, everything altered. The Candlestick Thieves were not robbers in the traditional sense. They entered, observed, altered, and vanished. Their purpose remained cryptic, but fear and unease were guaranteed. Tom's living room was the last room. The thieves formed a semicircle around the largest candle. Each figure bent slightly, as if acknowledging some unspoken ritual. The light flickered across the masks, revealing impossible angles, expressions frozen in eerie mockery. Subscribe to Halfway Dark. You need to see the next story to understand them. The semicircle dispersed. Candles remained, dripping wax in symbols too strange to interpret. Shadows stretched and recoiled, climbing walls and disappearing into corners. When Tom blinked, the thieves were gone. By morning, the house seemed normal. Only the hardened wax remained as evidence of their presence. Each drip, each shadow, every moved object suggested a deliberate design, a message encoded in fear. Neighbors whispered about what they saw. No one had ever caught the thieves entering or leaving, yet everyone knew they had been there. Some avoided windows at night, others left candles burning constantly, hoping light could deter what could not be seen. Tom sat at his kitchen table, staring at the dripping wax. Every droplet seemed to pulse with movement when he wasn't looking directly at it. Shadows flickered even in full sunlight, forming vague shapes that whispered faintly, repeating gestures of the thieves' silent dance. The Candlestick Thieves would return. Everyone knew it. Their ritual was ongoing, invisible yet absolute. And for those who dared to watch, every night became a test of attention, awareness, and courage. The Stitched Brigade. The neighborhood seemed normal at first glance. Street lights buzzed softly, and cars sat parked as always. But inside the houses, a different pattern was forming. Small, deliberate alterations no one could explain. Hannah noticed it first in her living room. A chair slightly turned, a blanket folded in a strange way. At first, she thought she was imagining it, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. Then she heard soft footsteps in the hallway, rhythmic but uneven. The sound wasn't heavy, but deliberate, like someone moving carefully over every surface. She froze, listening. 5 figures appeared at the end of the corridor. Their clothing was a patchwork of fabric, stitched from old garments that had belonged to others. Each piece was mismatched, yet perfectly sewn to their forms. Their masks were stitched too, jagged smiles and button eyes glinting faintly in the moonlight. They didn't speak, but the air felt thick with intention, as if every movement had meaning. Mini oaks kept escalating. Objects shifted as they passed. Picture frames tilted, rugs folded, and a single candle was moved from the shelf to the center of the room. The shadows they cast seemed to crawl along the walls. Hannah tried to leave, but the front door slammed shut silently. The Brigade had blocked her path without touching anything. Their stitched hands hovered over the air, fingers curling as if adjusting invisible strings. Stay alert. Halfway Dark is watching with you. They began moving through the apartment systematically. Each room altered just slightly. Drawers were rearranged. Books were stacked at odd angles. Items appeared to be sewn into new patterns on the floor, creating a visual map that Hannah couldn't decipher. The Brigade didn't make noise beyond their footsteps and the occasional fabric rustle. Yet the psychological pressure was unbearable. Every glance in their direction made her heart race. Outside, other neighbors experienced similar disturbances. Mismatched garments hanging on chairs, chairs rearranged, items subtly altered. No one had seen the Brigade enter. No one would see them leave. The Stitched Brigade seemed to communicate silently, moving in almost choreographed patterns. Every stitch of fabric on their clothing and masks reflected an attention to detail that unnerved Hannah beyond measure. By midnight, the Brigade paused. One figure knelt near the bed, placing a small doll stitched from cloth scraps in the center. Its eyes were mismatched buttons, staring directly at her. Keep watching. Subscribe to Halfway Dark to follow what comes next. The final hours were unbearable. Shadows stretched along walls, following movements. The Brigade moved silently from room to room, leaving subtle signs. A string here, a fabric scrap there, each message unknown but deliberate. When morning came, the Brigade vanished. Only subtle changes remained. The altered furniture, the doll, faint impressions of footsteps and dust. Hannah realized the terror wasn't in the presence itself, but in knowing they could return at any moment. Even weeks later, she would notice items subtly altered again. Clothes folded differently, chairs slightly turned, a doll appearing somewhere it hadn't been before. The Brigade wasn't gone. They were patient, observing from the shadows, waiting for the next night to continue their work. The Mirror Men. The apartment was quiet, but the reflection in the mirror felt wrong. Objects shifted subtly, the angles of the room bending just enough to unsettle. Something was moving behind the glass, but no one stood there. Eric froze. The reflection of his own hand didn't quite match the movement of his fingers. A faint ripple passed across the surface, like water, yet the mirror remained solid. At exactly 2:57 a.m., 5 figures appeared in the reflection. Their suits glinted unnaturally, reflective surfaces covering their bodies like living armor. Porcelain masks hid every expression, faces smooth and blank. The Mirror Men did not move in the room itself, only in reflections. Yet objects in Eric's apartment began to shift. The arm of a chair lifted slightly, a rug folded in half, a photo tilted. He stepped closer. The figures mirrored him perfectly, even exaggerating movements. Each tilt of his head, each breath, was matched, twisted, amplified. The room's shadows grew dense, creeping along walls independently. Many hooks kept rising. The reflection of a lamp bent at impossible angles. A shadow stretched across the ceiling, whispering words he couldn't quite hear. Every glance at a mirror heightened the tension. The Mirror Men seemed to study Eric, analyzing reactions. They tilted, jerked, and leaned, always synchronized, always deliberate. His reflection no longer belonged to him. A drawer opened slowly, seemingly by itself. A single mirror shard from the wall fell into it, reflecting a distorted version of the room he thought he knew. Stay close to halfway dark. Watching is the only way to understand them. Eric backed away, avoiding mirrors where possible. Each attempt to flee increased the distortion around him. Reflections multiplied in windows, picture frames, even glossy surfaces of furniture. They weren't stealing, destroying, or harming physically, yet the mental terror was absolute. Every mirrored surface became a portal for observation, every reflective angle a potential trap. Neighbors reported similar experiences, mirrors slightly warped, reflections lagging behind movements, shadows performing gestures independently. No one ever saw the Mirror Men in the flesh, only their reflections. Eric tried to cover the mirrors with cloth. Some slipped off, revealing figures staring directly at him. A miniature reflection appeared on his watch face, grinning faintly. Every object that could reflect light became part of their domain. At 3:03 a.m., all mirrors reflected the same impossible scene. 5 figures standing in perfect formation, watching silently. Eric dared to move. The reflection of his hand stretched unnaturally, then returned. The Mirror Men reached into reflections, altering furniture positions slightly. Every time he glanced at a mirror, they adjusted, always perfect, always synchronized. The line between reflection and reality blurred. If you want to see what they do next, subscribe to Halfway Dark. Watching is survival. By morning, all mirrors seemed normal. Yet Eric noticed faint scratches, streaks of light where shadows had touched, and the subtle feeling of being watched whenever he looked at any reflective surface. The Mirror Men never left. They only waited, existing in reflections, studying, learning, altering reality in imperceptible ways. Anyone who ignored the signs quickly realized the terror was ongoing. The lantern shadows. The night felt thicker than usual, like it pressed against every surface of the quiet cul-de-sac. Streetlights flickered erratically, casting shadows that slithered across lawns, bending unnaturally, reaching farther than their owners should have allowed. Margot awoke to the faint scrape of metal along the pavement outside. She pressed herself against the wall, listening as footsteps echoed faintly, irregular and soft, as though someone moved with careful patience, deliberately avoiding any creak of wood. She peered through the blinds. 5 figures glided across the street, each carrying tall lanterns that glowed with a sickly orange-red hue. Their garments were tattered and layered, stitched together from old coats and strange fabrics, forming shapes that distorted the human silhouette. Their faces were completely obscured. Shadows pooled beneath their hoods, but she could feel their gaze through the glass, a pressure in the air that crawled up her spine. Every movement was precise, choreographed, terrifying in its silent perfection. Margot's first instinct was to call for help, but her phone slipped from her hands, as though invisible fingers had knocked it aside. The lantern shadows paused, turning slowly, their lanterns casting elongated shapes that stretched and recoiled across walls, windows, and trees. Mini oaks. A gust of wind sent a swing creaking, yet no one touched it. Leaves danced unnaturally in the glow of the lanterns, twisting against gravity as if obeying some invisible choreography. Each movement was deliberate, a silent warning. The figures advanced onto her porch. The lanterns illuminated parts of the house, but only selectively, the edges of doors, the corner of the stairs. Shadows moved in the darkened parts, independent of the lantern light, stretching unnaturally along walls. Margot pressed herself against the door, realizing it was unlocked despite her certainty that she had bolted it. One lantern hovered near the threshold, its light pulsating in rhythm with her heartbeat. She wanted to look away, but her body refused. Stay close to halfway dark. Witness this carefully, and you might survive the night. The lantern shadows entered silently. They didn't speak, but the faint crackle of fire emanating from the lanterns whispered through the rooms. Furniture shifted imperceptibly as they passed. A chair tilted, a rug folded, a curtain brushed aside. They moved methodically, marking the space. Lanterns swung over tables, glinting off picture frames, reflecting twisted versions of Margot's own face back at her. Each reflection seemed alive, distorting subtly with every blink. Mini hooks, the floorboards creaked in patterns she couldn't predict. Books slid from shelves, landing upright without a sound. A clock ticked backward for a few moments, then resumed normally. Every small anomaly ratcheted tension higher. Margot's breathing became shallow as the shadows paused near her bedroom. One lantern swung low, casting an elongated silhouette across the wall, which then detached from the figure entirely. The shadow moved independently, stretching to the ceiling, creeping along the floor, and hovering just above her bed. The lantern shadows never touched her directly, but she could feel the weight of their observation, pressing on her chest, tightening her chest, whispering in a language she could not understand yet felt. Her first instinct was to flee, but the hallway seemed to extend infinitely. Every door she passed led to familiar rooms that had subtly changed, furniture in impossible angles, small objects misplaced, photographs slightly distorted. Subscribe to Halfway Dark. If you want to see how they move next, stay vigilant. They continued through the apartment, moving as one. Lanterns dipped toward the floor, revealing thin black lines that traced patterns through dust, crisscrossing each other in a maze she could not solve. Each line seemed purposeful, a map of their silent path. Margot's reflection appeared in a mirror. Her eyes were normal, but the reflection behind her blinked on its own, tilting its head and smiling faintly before retreating. Every reflective surface became a doorway for the lantern shadow's observation. Mini hooks. The shadows interacted with small objects. A vase teetered, then righted itself. A lamp cord twisted around a leg, and a candle was placed upright in the center of the living room, dripping dark wax in intricate patterns. By midnight, the shadows had covered every corner of the apartment. Lantern light flickered across the walls, revealing impossible forms. Shapes with extra limbs, distorted torsos, and faces that twisted unnaturally in the glow. Margot felt the air thicken. She could no longer discern where her apartment ended and their influence began. Every movement she made was mirrored by shadowed figures that were not there, their presence both intangible and absolute. The lantern shadows paused near the staircase. One figure knelt, its lantern illuminating a small drawing on the floor, a crude representation of her bedroom. Every piece of furniture marked, every window noted. It pulsed faintly, as though alive. Many hooks. A sudden draft lifted papers from a desk, arranging them into a message she could not read. Outside, a wind chime rang, despite the absence of wind. Every sound added to the sense that the shadows were everywhere, omnipresent, controlling everything. By 3:03 a.m., the shadows retreated slightly, leaving the faintest trace of black soot on surfaces and subtle drips from the lantern's wax. Margot realized she had survived, but only barely. The apartment was changed. She herself felt altered, aware that every movement would now be observed. The lantern shadows had not vanished. Their influence lingered in every reflective surface, in every shadow, in every sound. They would return, and those who did not witness them fully, who did not pay attention, would not survive the next encounter as consciously. The doll in my mailbox. It was Tuesday when I first found it. A small package in my mailbox, unmarked, with no return address. I assumed a delivery mistake. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside was a doll. Small porcelain face, button eyes, delicate hands. But the strangest thing? It looked familiar. Not just vaguely, but with a detail I couldn't place, like it had been carved from memory. A nose I recognized, a smile I thought I had imagined before. I set it aside. Probably a gag gift, someone's idea of a joke. But the next morning, the doll was on my kitchen counter. I didn't place it there. I was sure of it. Over the next few days, it moved again. Living room table, by my bed, the bathroom sink. Every morning, a new location. I started leaving notes. Don't touch me. Stop. Nothing. The doll remained silent and strangely calm. Then I began to notice the subtle changes. Its smile seemed wider, more knowing. Its eyes sharper, watching. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe paranoia was settling in. But I couldn't shake the feeling it was aware of me. I told a friend. They laughed. It's just a doll. Maybe someone's messing with you. But it felt different. I stopped laughing. The doll knew things it shouldn't. A week later, I left my apartment for a quick errand. Came back to find the doll holding my keys. My coffee cup was set next to it, and taped to its back, a tiny piece of paper. I know where you went. Fear rooted me to the floor. I wanted to burn it, smash it, throw it into the street. But when I tried, it always reappeared. Mailbox, table, counter. I started sleeping with one eye open, imagining it moving while I dreamed. The whispers came next, soft, almost inaudible. I told myself it was the wind, the pipes, my imagination. But sometimes I could swear it was the doll, or some presence tied to it. The voice knew my thoughts, my routines. Sometimes it murmured warnings, be careful, or observations. You were late today. I tried hiding it, boxed it up, locked it in the closet. The next morning, it was on the bed, staring at me with those unblinking eyes. Each day, it learned something new, adapted. Its presence became suffocating. I called the police, explained the situation. They came once, looked at the doll, noted no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints beyond my own. Probably someone playing a prank, they said. I wanted to scream, but I knew it wasn't that simple. The doll wasn't just an object. It was deliberate, patient, observant. Every move I made, every glance I threw, it seemed to anticipate. It became my shadow, silent but omnipresent. I tried leaving the apartment, staying with friends, even traveling. Packages returned at my new address. Each contained the doll, slightly altered. A new hat, a different dress, a change in expression. Each time it knew me more. I stopped sleeping. I started documenting. Camera footage, logs, voice recordings. Nothing captured movement. Nothing revealed the doll's origin. And yet, every day, it arrived, always altered, always present, always knowing. Eventually, I confronted it directly. Sat across from it, trembling. "What do you want?" I whispered. Silence. Then the doll tilted slightly. Not enough to move on its own, but enough to feel like a reply. I realized then that I was not in control. Never had been. The doll wasn't merely an object. It was a presence, a watcher, a silent force that had integrated into my life. Every detail I thought private, every action I took was cataloged, observed, learned. The horror box collects stories like mine. Stories of intrusion, obsession, and objects that are more than they appear. If you ever receive a gift you didn't order, or find something in your home that seems alive, heed it. Some presences are patient. Some follow without mercy. I've moved again. Changed apartments, cities, even altered routines. The doll, or something tied to it, still finds me. Every package, every subtle shift, reminds me that some things are never truly gone. Presence, observation, obsession, they follow. Even now, I glance at corners of my room, shadows of furniture, the faint outlines of the mailbox. And sometimes, just sometimes, I see a small shape in the distance, staring with button eyes, smiling that all-too-knowing smile. Some things aren't meant to be ignored. Some things never leave.